Lakeland Public Television presents Currents with host Ray Gildow. Sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, offering tax preparation for individuals and businesses across from the City Hall in Nisswa and on the web at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where tonight we're going to be talking about something that's vitally important to all of us, water, and a foundation that's spending a lot of time in our area trying to do something about it. And that is called the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation. And I have to be, in the spirit of full disclosure, to tell you that I'm a board member of this organization. It's one that I strongly believe in what they're trying to do. And so this evening I have the executive director, Lindsey Ketchel, who is here. And along with her is the land conservation specialist from the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation, John Sumption. John has been on our program a couple times over the years. And welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
It's a pretty exciting time, really, to be working in the areas of taking care of our water, because there's so many things going on. But before we get into that, Lindsey, maybe you could give us a little background about yourself, and John, maybe we could do the same with you.
Well, great. I moved here about 1.5 years ago from Alaska, where I served as the executive director for the Southeast Alaska Conservation Council. Very engaged in protecting wild salmon, forests, old growth forest. It was a wonderful experience. And before that, I spent about 22 years working in Vermont, working on sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry. My real passion is finding ways that we can build our economy and thriving rural economy that's in balance with natural systems and nature. And I truly believe we can do it. And I think the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation is positioned perfectly to continue to cultivate that kind of vision in our region.
And John, how about you? What's your background? And I know, but our viewers don't.
Right. Ray, I was worked for Cass County for 33 years. I was the district manager for the Cass Soil and Water Conservation District, and I also worked with the Environmental Services Department there. And I was, for the last 8 years of my tenure with the county, I was the Environmental Services Director. So that was my professional background. Since my retirement in 2009, I've been working as the land conservation specialist with the Leech Lake Area Watershed Project, and then also doing some other environmental consulting work.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about, and I know this is a mouthful that we might be able to change in the future, the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation. And I think the first impression that people have, well, I don't live by Leech Lake, so what does this have to do with me? But let's just talk a little bit about what is the foundation's major mission.
Okay, and we are a 501c3, so we are a nonprofit organization, and we do work in 4 counties: Cass, Crow Wing, Aiken, and Hubbard counties. So it's a very large, I'd say, footprint of which we do conservation work. And our main focus is getting to land protection. And there are many ways to go about doing that, whether that's through fee title acquisitions or conservation easements, or having landowners change their behavior on that land, how they look at their forest. And that's kind of our main thrust. And it was an organization really bred out of a grassroots movement. So I think it was just 97, 98, or a while back. A bunch of just strong heart activists pulled together and said, this region really means a lot to us. Our lakes, their vibrancy, keeping them functioning well, great fishing, great experiences, enjoying nature, hunting and fishing. And so they thrusted this organization, I think, into a very strategic position to really recruit landowners to consider donating and placing conservation easements on their land, or considering maybe selling to and having another state agency manage it. And so we've got a strong legacy of grassroots advocacy or grassroots engagement. And I would say the other big theme is partnerships. Everything we do is in partnerships. We're not an organization that's off on our own, doing our own thing. And whether those are lake associations or private individuals or other NGOs or state agencies or the funding partners, we all work very collaboratively together. And I think that those are such important values that we're going to make sure sustain themselves as we go through this strategic planning process and all the great new work we'll be doing, but that'll be a core value.
You need to have a little more enthusiasm about your I saw some maps showing the areas in Minnesota where it's almost, it is too late to restore quality of the lakes, especially in southern Minnesota. We've got some that are so algae ridden in August and September that you can put a boat and drive through them and see the track in the water.
Yes.
So what we're trying to do here, as I understand it, is we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen to the areas where the lakes are still in good condition. The Brainerd area is in the middle.
Yeah.
Some of the lakes like Gull, I did see one study that said for every running mile of shoreline on Gull Lake, there are 28 cabins or homes. And that means almost all that shoreland in that area is developed into mostly lawns.
Right.
And so what you're trying to do is to preserve the areas where it's not too late to do something about that.
Right.
And I've had other guests on the show off camera who said it's too late for some of those southern lakes. It's just too late unless we come up with lots of money and lots of new technology to restore them.
Right. Well, I think the thing is, in our area, is that we have a unique opportunity to do prevention and preservation. Unlike some of those areas you talked about, Ray, where they're in a restoration mode. They're behind the 8 ball and they're trying to restore lakes at incredible expense. We have the opportunity here to prevent some of those things from happening. And some of the property around lakes is area that can be developed without really causing a lot of harm. But there are a lot of other areas that are very, very sensitive and need to be preserved. And those are the ones we're really targeting.
Yep.
And when we look at the area that are served by this foundation, 5 counties for the most, 4 and overlap a little bit here and there. There's also a project that you're getting involved with to preserve some of the Cisco populations. And could you just talk a little bit about that, the two of you? Because
Sure.
I just think that is such an important topic, and we did cover it a little bit earlier in the fall in this show, but I think it's worth repeating for people that did not see that.
Sure.
What is this?
Well, there's the tullibee and Cisco lakes are really important, deep, cold water lakes up in this region, and they actually have some of the best recreation sport fisheries. And they're really the important part of the tullibee is they're the feeder. And it's so important if we really want to have vibrant fisheries is that you have good feeding stock for your fish to grow larger. So it's a very simple concept. So you want to have good feeders, but they're also very sensitive. And John maybe want to get into a little bit more about that sensitivity, but what we're finding is that because they're deep and cold, if we protect the land outside them, and this is the harder part I think for people to conceptually understand, that if we reduce stress on the water, if we reduce nutrients flowing in, so our idea is by placing conservation easements on that land and keeping that land still and doing in the forest, doing the work that the forests should be doing, which is absorbing the nitrogens and the phosphorus, that allows the lake ecology to function appropriately. And so the water, the columns stay, the fish are vibrant, but the challenge is we've got issues like climate change coming, which are going to create some additional warmth. So our belief is that if we can add those added protections, these lakes will have a chance to be resilient as we go through some of the climate challenges.
We always think of tullibees or Ciscos as the kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to these kinds of lakes. As Lindsey said, they are very sensitive to especially low oxygen conditions, and this is a lot of what happens when you get a influx of nutrients and sediment and whatnot. Is that that if you get sediment and you get nutrients, then the algae starts to grow and they suck up all the oxygen, and like I said, they're very, very sensitive. So the lakes that Lindsey is talking about we refer to as tullibee refuge lakes, and if we can preserve and protect 75% of the watershed around these lakes. A DNR study that was done by Pete Jacobson says that then those lakes will be protected and we hopefully won't have problems with those in the future. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. We're looking at really targeting the lakes where we have a chance to make a significant difference and reach that 75% goal, and thereby preserve those lakes so that we'd probably don't have to worry about those too much.
And the nice thing is we've gotten funds from legacy funds to then launch a program we call Clean Water Critical Habitat. And this is a program that allows landowners to apply for a conservation easement. And in that when we move forward with the application, the easement makes sure that the land doesn't get subdivided and that the land isn't fully developed. And so that's kind of what we're approaching. But what we're excited is that you can still donate that easement and take advantage of those tax advantages if you want to do a donation, or we have funds to actually acquire that easement. And not all landowners are in a position to do a donation. So I'm delighted that we can actually compensate that landowner for some of that loss of projected development moving forward. And in the end, it becomes a win-win, I believe, for everyone, because if these are really also critical, I describe them as recreational lakes that are important to our entire economy up here. A lot of people don't realize that, but without great fishing, without great lakes, it will affect our tourism industry, and those really do go hand in hand. And then I think culturally, these lakes are so important to what it means to be a Minnesotan. And that's, as someone coming in new, that's the thing that I found so fascinating is that this connection to having cabins up in the lake region and the family connections and generational connections. People really want to do this easement work because they want to protect that culture of Minnesota. So this goes beyond just water quality or the dollar signs. I believe this is really about culture for Minnesota, and that's what we're trying to protect.
So there are 3 organizations involved in this grant. It's the Land Trust,
Yeah, the Minnesota Land Trust,
the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation, and
the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So it's a strategic partnership, and what we do is act as the landowner recruiter. We line up the landowners. Ultimately, the Minnesota Land Trust drafts the easement and will hold the easement, but ultimately it's a synergistic partnership because we're right here in the community. We know the folks, we know the lakes, we know based on our criteria where the highest landowners that we can get the best, I say, value for the dollars invested in those protections. And so it works out really well where all the partners are in their wheelhouse. And then I said Minnesota Department of Natural Resources has some of its own easement programs on same lakes, but we're working very collaboratively to make sure that we don't confuse landowners or maximize the resources that we have. And in addition to doing conservation easement, we also do fee title acquisitions and transition those lands into DNR might become a long-term landowner, the Forest Service. We try to look for a state agency or federal agency to do that, but we're also doing AMAs, aquatic management areas, on some of these tullibee lakes too.
Depends on the wishes of the landowner.
Right.
Some people want to retain ownership of the land and continue to use it. Others are in a position where they want to see the land preserved, but they just as soon see it managed by someone else, and that's where we can help with the acquisitions.
And that's probably the best part of our jobs is we get the delightful honor to meet with these landowners who are really passionate about protecting not only their land, their lake, I described their culture, but these folks really come into it with a great heart and a great sense of pride. And they are very concerned that their grandkids are not going to have the same experience that they have. And I think that's such a powerful legacy and such a great place to be in as a person, to recognize that you've had it well, and I really want to make sure this next generation also has that same opportunity.
we have a photo of tulipies for people who might not know what a tulipee is if they're not anglers.
Right.
And having been in the fishing industry myself for many, many years, I can tell you, I can remember when tulipies were much more prevalent on the big waters like Mille Lacs and Leech in the 70s. I was looking at water temperature changes from the 70s till today. It's unbelievable. It really is.
Yes.
In mid-July in the 70s, a typical summer, you might see 76, 77 degrees on a Gull Lake or a North Long Lake. And we've seen years where it's 83, 84 degrees, where we had one year where we had a week of almost 90, 100 degrees, and we're seeing large walleyes floating in the lakes because they were going down to get away from that warmer water and then getting into the area where there was no oxygen.
Right.
And I can remember, and John, you probably can too, seeing large tulipee kill-offs on Leech Lake when it got too warm. You don't see those anymore, do you? those tulipies are not.
They're not there anymore.
They're not there anymore like they used to be, which
That's
is really
exactly
sad.
right.
And for people who don't know it, that tulipy is a forage base for the walleyes, the northern pikes, and the muskies in particular. So preserving these waters is really, really crucial. Now, this is just the first stage of working together with these three organizations.
Yes.
And you're recruiting landowners who are interested in working with either an easement or one of those options. Are there still openings for people to get involved with that if they want to?
Oh yes, absolutely. We're constantly interested in landowners calling us and recruiting them. We just recently finished out a Lessard Sam's phase project, but we'll have others coming in line. So, you know, we're never short of, I should say, we're always open and wanting landowners to engage us. And we always want to line them up with the right program to get to the right end. But what I will say, my other observation is that in general, though, some people kind of look at a lake, it visually looks fine, so they think everything is fine. And I think that's the other important role that we play, is helping people understand that what we do on the surface, on land, impacts water quality, and visually a lake might look well, but the truth is it could be under a lot of stress. And by adding this extra layer of protection, we're really trying to get at reducing that stress within that water system. And that's still a hard concept for people to kind of wrap their arms around. So a landowner might turn around, I should say, my experience is a lot of landowners, though, are observing these declining trends and wanting to engage and be part of the solution. But it's the newer folks who are moving in who kind of think everything looks fine. Hey, I'm out there having a good time. Everything is fine.
No, they have no background. You know,
Right.
they don't have a history.
Right. So a lot of times what we spend a lot of time doing, convincing people that there is issues up here that you have to be concerned with. And, you know, we also have the challenge of dealing with folks that understand that just because something's good, is it worth, do you really need a Band-Aid on that? Or, you know, what's that saying, an ounce of protection equals a cure, you know, that cure, whatever.
Cure,
yeah. It's very hard sometimes for folks in St. Paul to say, oh yeah, we want to invest because, you know, your lakes are already good. Why make an investment there? And we're trying to say, no, by investing now and doing easements, doing some of these land protections, you're going to avoid huge amount of restoration dollars in the next 20 years if we can attack this issue now. And that's why it's so exciting to be engaged, not only with the organization and with the region and with all our partners, because we see that window. I believe it's about a 10 or 12 year window where we could have profound impact on protecting these lakes in the future.
Now, are there strategies to get additional monies down the road to expand this program?
Yes, I think in general we're going through strategic planning as an organization, so that's also equally exciting, and we've been doing focus groups with all our partners, carving out new and future avenues and opportunities. So beyond additional resources, I think we're going to be expanding the work that we're going to be engaging. A new initiative that just recently got seeded is called the Northern Water Alliance, where we're working with lots of advocacy organizations who are very concerned that you've got development, we've got pipelines being proposed, we have lots of potential threats to our water quality up here, and how can we as citizens talk about that and find our political voice to influence folks in St. Paul. And then I think there are other things we need to be doing about the future generation, the young folks coming in. Are they able to be educated and be in a position where they know enough to really do positive impact to lake ecology? And so things like a water center has been discussed, and classrooms for the youth, and ways of educating the youth. So I think, you know, there's a bright future ahead of us strategically, not only for money for easements or the program, but also diversifying and expanding our work.
I've read a couple articles, and I follow some of the NASA studies on worldwide fresh water.
Yeah.
And it's really frightening to see what's happening worldwide,
Yes.
especially in the Middle East, California, because of their drought.
Yes.
We are dealing with a resource in Minnesota that is going to become more important than oil, I believe, in a very short period of time, because we're
Right,
running
yes.
out of it.
Yes.
And we're drilling in California, they said water that's taken 1,000 years to get to where it's at.
Yeah.
And we're pumping it out now because of the drought.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for Minnesotans, and Minnesotans are very I think, very concerned about water. I think there's
Yes.
a part of that reason that the Sarge-Sams bill passed is people thought it was important to take care of our environment. So to me, we're working on cutting edge things here
Yes.
when we talk about this, because we're looking at preserving things that are not beyond repair yet. When you get to Austin and you look at some of the lakes in that area, what would you do to restore some of that? It's green water now.
Right.
I mean, it really is green water.
Right.
So it's pretty exciting. So these three organizations, the Land Trust, the DNR, and your organization, will they be going back for more money from the Sarge-Sams in the next funding cycle to try
We
to?
have a next phase actually already approved that's going to be, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's going to be, hopefully we can start that in July next year. That's when the funding cycle starts. Lindsey also has submitted a proposal to the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, LCCMR, to set up a different companion program that works through the Board of Water and Soil Resources to do what we call RIM easements, Reinvest in Minnesota easements. And that uses a little different strategy. In that one, the Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, actually holds the easement as a state agency. And the easements are calculated rather than being based on an appraisal of the property. There's a straight formula-based system, which may work better for some folks.
Landowners to know upfront compensation.
Here's how much we can tell people. We know what where your land is, what it is. We can tell you right now exactly this is what you're going to get. And this may work better for people with forested lands, with people, with some property that may not be right on the lake, but still in the watershed and is still important to protect. Mm-hmm. So we're always looking for new programs and new avenues and new sources of funding that'll support these efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to state here that that your organization is not looking to hold land. You're not collecting land. You are the middle person to get this into the proper places.
We're the facilitators.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And a perfect example, last year we got a phone call from a landowner who wanted to donate the land. It was right next to the Stony Point Park on Leech Lake, and it's 3 acres, and the Forest Service would love to have long-term management. So we took ownership, had a little clouded title. We invested a little bit of money cleaning up that title, and then we will reposition it back to the Forest Service. So we're always trying to figure out ways to build conservation complexes or build off of already that natural resource, I'd say, base of protection. And so we typically don't want to hold a lot of land because then we have to pay property taxes and have those same other expenses. But we kind of act as a go-between and can have that capacity. And I think the nice thing is, as I mentioned before, we are going through strategic planning processes, and we really encourage lots of folks to just share with us what you're thinking. Call us up at the office or email or talk to John and I, because we're always engaged to hear creative ways of moving forward, not only as an organization, but in the end, we really just want to make a strong impact on the land and in these communities, and being able to listen and you'll hear as our board member strategic ways of moving forward.
We just have a few minutes left.
Okay.
But maybe we could summarize for people who may still be a little confused about what are all these terms.
Yeah.
So let's just say,
Sorry.
no, but I think it's just understandable if you don't deal with it all the
Yeah.
time. It's hard to remember what it is. But let's just say you're a husband and wife, and you've got 8 acres along the lake, and you just have your cabin on a little piece of it, and you want to make sure that the rest of it doesn't get developed. When they come to you, tell them the options that you would talk to them about, just really briefly.
Well, you'd say, all right, if you want to continue to use the land essentially as you have, but you're willing to give up the rights to subdivide that, the conservation easement is probably the way you want to go. It does allow you to.
They could still pass it on to their
absolutely,
kids and everything.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And it's on the market, it can get sold just like any parcel. Yep.
Sure. If they say, boy, this is more land than we'll ever use, and we don't really want necessarily to own the rest of this, but we really do want to see it preserved, then we'd look at maybe a sister organization, or the state, the DNR, if it was a piece of property that they wanted, say as a wildlife management area or an aquatic area, that would be an option. So, we would, as Lindsey said, we would look at in talking with the landowner, figure out what their best option is, and then we'll find a way to help accomplish that.
And it's important to state here that that's driven by the people that own the property.
Yes.
Yes.
No one else is going to come in and tell them what to do.
No.
That's totally up to them, but it's an opportunity to preserve some of this really important land around our lakes. And as you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a lake. It could be a watershed.
Could be a river.
Yes. It could be along a river or
Forested area.
right.
I always tell people that in the end, we're not happy unless you're happy. And if they're satisfied with the result, then I've done my job.
And I know this foundation has preserved a lot of shoreline where muskie fishing has occurred, and like on Leech Lake.
Yep.
There's been some really significant preservation that's occurred over the last 5 or 6 years through the Leech Lake Area Watershed Foundation. And if they want to get in touch with the organization, what should they do?
Well, you email me, and our email address is llawf@tds.net is probably the best way to get hold of us, and we'll also make sure you can get our phone numbers too.
That's a long word, and we're going to work on changing the name, maybe
yes.
to wet or something. Just something simple that people can remember.
Right, and we get lucky. We get out to meet lots of folks at these lake association meetings, and they're just confused. They just think we work in Leech Lake, and why are we down here? So we just want to make sure folks know we're a resource and available to help them work through all the options that they have available to us. So we may be looking at a new name and some expanded opportunities.
And if you study this, you'll see that this watershed goes all the way through Minnesota. It's providing drinking water in the cities, so
yes.
it's a very important thing.
Yes.
Thank you both for taking the time to be on
Thank
our
you,
program.
Ray.
Thanks,
we
Ray.
appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and let's keep that healthy water available for our future generations.
Great.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.